Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you, and today we get to talk about the AMD 500 series of graphics cards. So 500 series, one thing I do want to say straight away is if you've got all excited and you're here because you think this is Vega, it's not. It's Polaris evolved. So Polaris, you must remember Polaris, that's where the 480, the 470 and the 460s all came in. Well, essentially what they've done, and we could pretty much cap the review after this, is the 500 series is an evolution of Polaris. Now when they make these things, the manufacturing process, when they're making all the silicon and stuff, they can refine it as they, putting it into layman's terms, get used to it or get better at it. So they make the yields better, and then they can also refine the process, which normally means higher clocks. This has happened with other brands in the past. Intel, for example, Skylake to Kaby Lake, that was a refinement process. So with this, we've still got Polaris, but let's call it Polaris 2 or Polaris Plus. And we've got the pretty much the same things going on underneath the hood, but just slightly better. Some of the other things that they've done, a lot of the times with the pluses or the second generations of them, sometimes you get kind of a little bit better software and stuff that comes with it. Kind of the kind of software-y sort of stuff that sits alongside it. And help things work that little bit better, again because they've got used to what they've been making. Now I've got quite a few bits and bobs to go through with you. We're going to smash through some graphs and etc and everything as well, but the card that I had on test, because I've not seen a reference sample. AMD have sent out manufacturer kind of, you know, third party vendor designs, whatever you want to see. Now I got the Powercolor Red Devil, and I love the box because it looks like it's kind of shimmering the whole time. Anyway, when we do look at the box, one of the things I do want to draw your attention to straight away is FreeSync 2. And then the Relive Capture is some software that AMD are pushing, and this is basically streaming software that doesn't absolutely smash your CPU to bits. And what they're basically saying is when you are streaming, you'll get less dips and stutters. So that's something that you can keep an eye on. And we're obviously Vulkan. Now chill is a weird thing that we'll talk about in a minute. It's weird, but good, but something that you might need to pay attention to. Anyway, Powercolor Red Devil card. I did actually get the 480 version of this, and I can say that this is significantly better than the 480 version. I've got all of the results that we've got are on here, were tested on this, and we've also, I did test it in the overclock mode because it's got a little switch here, so you've got an overclock mode here, and you do actually have an LED switch on it as well, so you can turn the LED off if you want. But up on this end, because we're going to do it all kind of like fairly quickly, we've got an 8-pin and a 6-pin power here. You get a nice backplate, you've still got the pentagram on it, but they've done a better job, I think, of the design with this one. Round this side, if you have a look, we've got a HDMI here, got 3 display ports and then a DVI. The fact it's only got one HDMI might not please some of you VRists, but I'm pretty sure, as you'll be aware, that it's easier for you to be able to convert a display port to a HDMI than the opposite way round. So if any of you out there are running triple screens, for example, then obviously you can run the display ports, although you can run your FreeSync over HDMI anyway. But anyway, so if you do need another HDMI, the DisplayPort to HDMI adapters you shouldn't have any problems with whatsoever. We've got 2 meaty fans, and there's something I do need to kind of ever so slightly draw your attention to with this card, is it does hang over the slot a little bit down here. So it's a little bit, yeah, great Tom, yeah, brilliant. So it does hang over the slot a little bit more. Now I wouldn't say it's a 2.5 cooler, but it's definitely a 2 1/4 at least. So if you're limited on space, M80X for example, where the cards would be right side by side, this just won't fit. But essentially the black aluminium I even got the N in the proper place there. I'm starting to feel proud. So the black aluminium is bolted onto the red, which is a plastic cover. So something that I could say with this card specifically is if you did want to turn it into a bit of a project, then you could, for argument's sake, paint either of them a different colour. So if you had a black and blue build, you could easily paint the plastic of the red, paint it blue. Bosh! If you were me, I would probably paint the black white, and you've got red and white. So they come apart quite easily. The fans are only held on with 3 screws. So there's something there that I would say in itself is a weekend or a customizer, someone that wants to, you know, make their rig their own, and that is such an easy job that you could do as well. Anyway, so my reviews and my performance are going to be based around this. And it does have a slightly higher clock speed, but the stock clock speeds that they're saying for the 580s, the 580 base clock should be 1257 megahertz with a boost of 1340. If you compare that to the old 480, it would have been 1120 and 1266. So pretty much what we've got here is the boost of the 480 is now the base of the 580, and we got a step that way. It's slightly different with the 570 because we have got 580, 570, 560 and 550 this time. The 550 is a little itty bitty card. But anyway, so the 570 is going to come in with 1168 megahertz and 1244 boost, whereas the 470 was only 926 megahertz based with a 1206 megahertz boost. So really there's not a massive difference between the boosts on those. It's only 44 megahertz. But the actual base clock on the 570 is significantly higher. Now don't forget, these are the base clocks. And then the manufacturers can do what they want and they're on in. So for argument's sake, my Powercolor Devil, it actually came with a 380 megahertz boost, and pretty much the default clock. Anyway, it didn't move or do anything. Now, if you'll remember anything from the 400 series, looking at the clock speeds themselves only really told us half the story, because what we needed to do was open GPU-Z, go to sensors, smash the core clock at the top a few times. It's actually 3 clicks, and then it gives us the average, and we can use that as a way to monitor how much the performance dances, because, and I say dance because it can go up and down. Now that's normal, that's not a bad thing, not a bad thing at all, because essentially there are parts of the games that are much less demanding, so it was their way of trying to save power. The green team do a very similar thing as well, and it's always something that we keep an eye on. But what we did notice with especially the reference 480 was the average was significantly lower, and your average clock was pretty much based on how much of the percentage, you know, in like Afterburner and stuff like that, you have the power percentage dial that you can do. If you move that up, your average clock went up as well. So that is something that we paid a lot of attention to with that. Now with this, the Powercolor one, we were getting, basically our average was about 40 megahertz lower than our peak. So the fact that they were so close was absolutely great. Now I did give it a bit of a tickle as well to see if I could manually overclock it any further, and I was getting somewhere between 40 and 60 megahertz extra. Now one thing I do need to let you know is AMD dropped the cards on us just before a bank holiday weekend in the UK, and we'd also spent the previous weekend and week absolutely going flat taps with all the Ryzen 5 stuff. So I apologise if the review doesn't have the normal amount of data that you may have been used to with me doing full overclock tests as well. But to be fair, it was a bank holiday weekend, and I'd spent the last weekend before and the week before that doing all AMD stuff anyway. So it was just, I wrote it off. So I've done all stock tests with this, but there was only 50 or 60 megahertz on top that we could have nailed on anyway. So I wasn't going to spend another day testing the card again. So I just wrote it off. We may go back and look at it at a later date, do it with other cards, you know, whatever. But we literally just ran out of time. So 1334 megahertz. So that's just as an average. That's something for you to keep in mind and all that sort of stuff. Now, I did talk to you about the 580, the 560 and the 550, and we've got pictures here of what they look like or whether they would look like. I have no idea, but we got HEVC. I call it HVEC. I don't know why, because really the E's in the wrong place. But anyway, H265 4K encoding and decoding for those of you that maybe wanted to use it as in a media PC in the front room, or for transcoding films for your Plex servers or anything like that. The Radeon Chill is something that I do want to talk to you about. Essentially, what that is if you are playing a game and you stop moving for whatever reason, and then the frame rate just rockets because there's less stuff going on and there's less movement going on. Well, what the Chill does is it kind of brings that massive frame spike down. Now that's a good thing because it means it's going to reduce your heat, it's going to reduce your power consumption. But for me, for example, when I'm testing, that is something I will be turning off, because you need those peaks sometimes to, if I kept those the Chill on and it brought my peaks down, that could actually change your average score. So in an air to test everything, you know, fairly, that would be something I would probably be looking to turn off. With the games and the benchmarks that we use, it didn't seem to make a massive amount of difference. So I think it's going to be title specific. There are a lot of titles that it's confirmed to be used on now. Doesn't seem to be much DirectX 12 at the moment. It's all normally the games that I've seen. It's the DX11 variant, the DX11 variant, but this is obviously very early days. FreeSync technology. In the slides that we got from AMD, it only said FreeSync, whereas on the box you could see it clearly said FreeSync 2. So we're going to be paying attention to what the changes are and all that sort of thing coming up. It's not something that I've been sent any information on. There's obviously like rumours and all that sort of stuff going around, but until it lands in my inbox, I try not to talk about it too much in the videos, because you never know, they might change it. So we know about the boost clocks and all that sort of stuff. 1257, 1340, 36 compute units, 8GB of memory, bish bash bosh, lovely, lovely. They did actually send us some of the like the games, and I'll show this up for you. Although I have done my own testing, but they showed that, and it's like, okay, lovely bubbly, but you have to be honest, they're all very AMD loving games. Now, they're obviously going to send us very AMD loving games, but then that's why we then do our own independent testing, and we don't just give you those results. With the 570, I've talked to you about the performance there. I've talked to you about the clocks and stuff there. It's only got 32 compute units, 4GB of memory. They're actually saying this is you can turn your 1080p gaming right up. Now, I've not been sent a 570. It's obviously, we'll get them from the vendors later. But I did just want to bring this into you, and I will show you the 570 going here. But again, here they're talking about it. You've got the 570. They're only putting it up against a 960, which is kind of interesting because it's 960, not 1060, so it's a slightly older one. On the graph here for the 580, the one that I splashed you up, that was actually the 970 as well, and not the 1070. So they're the graphs that they're showing you here are with the older stuff. Now, something I do want to show you, because obviously that's just the AMD stuff that they send us. I do know that they're not aiming this at 480 users. So if you've got a 480 and you're thinking to yourself, do I need to buy a 580? This is conclusion material, but pretty much no. Overclock your card and you'll be all right. This won't be a viable upgrade for any of you there, unless you're running like a 460 or a 417, you've got a few quid and you don't know which way to swing, do you know what I mean? And you're looking at the fives, but we'll save that for the conclusion. Anyway, performance testing. So power graph, bish bash, massive. Yes, it's huge. We've done loads of testing, and we use Unigine for this, and we test all the cards in the same way as well. So the most important thing to drive home here is where the 580 Devil sits, and it sits just above an overclocked 480. So essentially what we've got here is we're not getting any massive power, less power usage or anything like that. The fact that they're driving home, the fact that it may use less power, that's all with those little software and driver tweaks with the chill. So essentially underneath the hood it's still using the same amount of power, because essentially it's pretty much an overclocked version of the original Polaris anyway, or it's at least running a lot higher and you've got better clocks there. So the fact it's using more power, or using about the same sort of power as an RX580 with an overclocked, I'm not surprised. Temperature though, much better. Don't forget this is the temperature on the Devil, and it's 75 degrees. Now it's 75 degrees because you do need to remember they have power targets. It's just like with the Green Team. With this, it will run itself at 75 degrees and it will adjust the fans accordingly around that point. You can, with the software, go in and change your temperature target and it will run according to that. If you want your, say for argument's sake, you wanted to set your temperatures to 50 degrees though, either the fans would go absolutely nuts or the card would then start to clock itself to a point, as in down clock itself to a point that it can keep those temperatures. So the reason why we go with like 75 is a fairly healthy one, to be fair. So you get the balance between heat in your rig and noise and performance, but with it running at 1380 megahertz out the box, it's fairly fast anyway. It's got a fairly beefy overclock on it for Polaris. So with the temperature testing at 75 degrees, it hit exactly what the card has been designed for. But like I said, you can change the power target if you'd like to. Now with the rest of the tests and games, we have introduced some new stuff. Unigine Superposition, for example, is the game. It actually came out just last week. I think it was Tuesday they released it last week. So what we did with this, we took a lot of our, what we call our stock cards. We do some game testing, as in performance testing, and we have a select amount of cards that we use for that in every one of the performance reviews. So we use those cards, and that's what we've kick-started our graph with. So it's not a full meaty one like you had with the temperature test, but it gives you an idea where it may sit. This will obviously expand over time, but the fact that the 580 in such close proximity in testing, because the 480 Strix that is in that graph will have been tested last week. So the fact that it is a little bit faster, they're also going to be, the 480 will be the most recent 480 driver, and then we're moving on to this one. So you can already see that there's a little bit of a kick up there, but one of the main reasons why that will be slightly faster is because of the fact that the average boost is so consistent with the peak boost. 3D Mark Firestrike Ultimate sits in about the middle of the graph. Really the thing that you need to be seeing here is you've got the 1060 Strix, both in stock and overclock, just slightly above. But Future Mark has always loved the green cards. Now with the games, we did do some new games this time. We introduced the Ghost Recon, which you can go to on the OC3D website, and you can go and see those game results there. But we've also got here, we've reintroduced Warhammer, because there's been an update with the benchmark and it's all in on the game now. So we're now running the Warhammer benchmark in our graphics cards, and we've also added in Deus Ex as well. And one of the things I will be saying, we are mixing up our graphics card testing at the moment, so it's going to be evolving over the next 3 to 4 weeks, just as we get stuff put in, graphics cards retested, and then, yes, it does mean you get small graphs like this at first, but obviously as I review more cards and we add in the 570s and more 580s, maybe even chuck a 560 in there or two, the graphs will start to beef up, and that's when we get lots more stuff to talk about. So we've got those results there, we splashed them up for you. You can make your own mind up. If you're really interested, you can go to the OC3D website, as I've said, and you can go and pick apart the graphs there. So essentially with the card itself, I'm glad to say that the Powercolor Devil branding and all of that sort of stuff is back to where I would have expected it. I didn't think that the cooler was adequate on the 480, but I'm glad to say that with the 580 they've got their act together, and it's back to feeling A, feeling like a sturdy card again, but B, the temperatures are there, the performance is there, it's significantly better. Now this is only the first one that I've tested, so I don't know what the other vendors are going to be bringing to the table, but the clocks are on point. The fact that the boost was there with such a small amount of difference between the peak boost and the average boost, and it was quiet. I was actually quite impressed. It was back to the days of that is better rather than something's not right. So they've totally redesigned the cooler on this one, and it shows as well, because it doesn't creak. It sounds nice. It's got a bit of weight to it. It sounds nice as in it's not noisy. So it's a step back to form for Powercolor on this one. And the other thing that I actually quite liked about this card was, like I said, about the fact that you could bust off that black bit and you could mod the card if you wanted to, which would make quite a nice weekend project. So we kind of, because it's the first 580, we kind of have to give the Powercolor and the AMD kind of thing as a whole an award kind of together, and it makes a bit weird. But essentially with the 580, it's very, very strong contender for 1440, if I'm honest. If you're willing to turn the settings down, it does play all right on a lot of the games. It absolutely whizzes over 1080 though. If you're looking for a card that you can play at 1080 with pretty much everything maxed out on the majority of games, because there's obviously going to be games that are either badly optimised or just absolute resource hogs to stress the bejesus out of your rig, then you may be, you may have to turn those down a little bit more. But 1080 it'll absolutely whiz. 1440 it will give a good run for its money as well. And it's coming in at 230 quid. So it's actually pretty damn good. It's one of those ones where you're like, wow, that is genuinely quite good. I think one of the ones with, even with DSX, 1080 with a DSX benchmark, which if you ever run it, it's an absolute killer. 1080 was 50.4 average on DS, and you know how pretty that looks, and you know how stressful that can be. So I know that's only 1080, but that's why I said it's very good for 1080. You can get it up to 1040, and with DSX we're running that on Ultra as well, because we always max our games out. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Warhammer we did Ultra, Ghost Recon we did that on Ultra as well. We always go for the worst case scenario. So there's a lot of really nice things to be said about it. So 580, the other thing that I wanted to kind of, we've just had Ryzen 5. These are going to be absolutely perfect for Ryzen 5. So if you're thinking about the 1500X or the 1600X, if you like a few more cores and you may want to do that streaming as well, or, you know, have better, but anyway, so with that Ryzen 5, they would genuinely make a very good partner. The other thing to think about as well, if you're going to go single card, which is the critical thing is single card, then one of the B350 boards would be an absolute match for it as well. I've got the Asus B350 Prime here, and the reason why I'm pulling it out is because I have to review this shortly. And I've also got the Gigabyte AB350 Gaming 3 because they can't put enough words on a box. I have actually reviewed the MSI Tomahawk as well. The only reason why it's not in this lineup is because 2 days after I finished reviewing it, it had to go on to the next reviewer. So there's a lot of B350 boards that you should keep your eyeballs open for as well. Because when you think about it, you could build yourself quite a powerhouse of a rig for not a massive amount of money. And that's genuinely where this whole range comes in. So rather than me spending the next 10 minutes talking to you about all the different sort of configurations that you could get with processors and graphics cards and motherboards, just take it as a little bit of a hint. And I'm going to love you and leave you with the Gamer's Choice Award, because I genuinely think this is kind of gaming on a budget, but actually genuinely being able to enjoy it, which is quite a unique thing, that we are getting to the point that you don't have to spend your entire granny's inheritance on a rig to be able to play a game with all the bells and whistles up. So that's pretty damn good. And the fact that, like I said, 1080, it's gonna love it. 1440, be prepared to turn the AA off or right down and maybe not be able to run it on Ultra and maybe very high. But, you know, it depends, you know, where your priority is going to be. The other thing to think about as well is if you prefer high frame rates, then you're going to need to go for the 1080 side of it. If you don't mind, you know, dropping your frame rates down a little bit and you just want that larger resolution, then you know where to trade it off. I suppose the only thing that I've not really said about the fact is comparing it to the green cards. And to be honest with you, it's in the graphs. It's very, very competitive. It's a lot more competitive than Nvidia would probably like it to be honest with you. So the only thing that I can say, if you don't know which way to swing, whether you don't know whether to buy a green or a red, go shopping for your bargain cards, because it's all going to come down to which card you end up wanting to pay for. There's obviously going to be some of the vendors that are going to end up charging you a bit more because of lights on them or a slightly better cooler so it's quieter. But really it's going to come down to where you want to go with it. You may want to match it with your motherboard. So if you've got the Gigabyte here, you might end up buying one of the Aorus graphics cards, because there's going to be some quite tasty Gigabyte Aorus ones. Asus, I know for a fact there's going to be Strix versions. MSI are going to have the red and black gamings. They do a red and black B350 board, so at least in that respect they're going to kind of match as well. So just go and see which, you know, really which one's going to suit your budget more, because they are so very close now. It's actually kind of interesting to see which one you're going to end up wanting to go with. The only other thing that it's just come to mind that I've not mentioned, it probably should have gone at the beginning, but anyway, it's single take and I don't script, is they've concentrated really hard on multi-screen power reduction. So when it's running at idle on a desktop, you know, normal browsing, email, office sort of work, they've focused on bringing the power usage down for those, including those of you like me that may be running multiple mental screens. It's not necessarily going to be something that a lot of people are going to pick up on, because you're never going to know unless you've got loads of screens attached. And it's, from what I've seen, it's not a massive amount of power reduction, but it is there, do you know what I mean? And it was worth mentioning, even if I had forgotten about it and I had to nail it on in the end. Anyway, with a red face, I'm just going to go now. Gamer's choice. Love it.